The King of Fighters, SNK's biggest gaming franchise, has taken the world by storm in the 90s and continues to be an important part of today's fighting game world. But how did this beloved series came to be? And how did it evolve and survive to remain one of the best fighting games out there? Join us as we travel back in time and dive deep in the history of the King of Fighters. The early 90s was an era seen by many as the golden age and resurrection of the video game industry. While many young players were enjoying quality playtime from the comfort of their homes, others were focused on the competitive side of gaming at the arcades, specifically as it was the time of the rise of fighting games. The successful release of Street Fighter II by Capcom in 1992 ushered a desire by many other gaming companies to enter this new genre of gaming. And while many have tried, only one company will go down as the true rival of Capcom in its Street Fighter titles, and that is of course Shin Nihon Kikaku, also known as SNK. SNK was not new to gaming. The company have made some very successful arcade games in the late 70s and early 80s, like Vanguard and Ikari Warriors. And after making profits porting their old games to the then very popular NES system, the company would decide to enter the home and hardware market with a bang, as they introduced their new hardware in 1990 known as the Neo Geo. The Neo Geo was designed as both an arcade system in the form of the Neo Geo MVS as well as a home console in the form of the Neo Geo AES. Both hardware used the same components, offering for the first time the ability to have arcade-level graphics and gameplay at home. With its brand new system now released in the arcades, SNK saw potential in the new 1 vs 1 fighting genre, and was so willing to bet on this new type of games that it greenlit a number of projects that would use the idea of versus fighting and even try to evolve it further. By 1993, these included the first Fatal Fury game, which was released around the same time as Capcom's Street Fighter II, as well as Art of Fighting. The success of these games allowed SNK to follow with Fatal Fury 2, Samurai Showdown, Fatal Fury Special, and Art of Fighting 2. While neither the Fatal Fury nor Art of Fighting series reached the level of popularity of Street Fighter, the two franchises were considered a hit and introduced gamers to powerful new characters and stories, like Terry and Andy Bogard, Ryo Sakazaki, Robert Garcia, and many other warriors. Fatal Fury Special, which was SNK's latest release title in 1993, received rave reviews for its large cast, great gameplay, and stunning graphics. But one particular, somewhat hidden feature that made Fatal Fury Special the subject of many articles and discussions back in the day was the inclusion of a guest character from another franchise, Ryo Sakazaki. Protagonist of SNK's other flagship fighting game Art of Fighting, Ryo was a hidden boss in Fatal Fury Special. Players who are able to reach and defeat the final boss of the game, Wolfgang Krauser, without losing a single round, would get a final match against Ryo. The great reception this hidden battle generated had prompted SNK to decide on crossing over characters from its two fighting game series into a new title. While both Fatal Fury and Art of Fighting are fighting games, the original idea for the crossover title was a beat-em-up side-scrolling game called Survivor. The title would feature the ability to control a team of warriors as they scroll through the streets of Southtown to beat various enemies. However, the idea was quickly scrapped before any sprite work even begun, as SNK decided to change the genre of the game from a beat-em-up to a fighting game, and the title from Survivor to the King of Fighters. The title of which was that of the main fighting game tournament in the Fatal Fury and Art of Fighting series and lore. But instead of bringing a new traditional 1 vs 1 fighting game, SNK decided to break the mold and create a team battle fighting game, where 3 characters would fight 3 contenders. Something never heard of before. To achieve this very bright idea of a crossover game, SNK put a dream team to develop the ambitious title. After the massive success of the Fatal Fury series and Capcom's Street Fighter before it, SNK wanted to bring back the father of modern fighting games, Takashi Nishiyama, and gave him the role of executive producer, supervising the entire dream team behind the project. As for the role of director, the company decided on Masanori Kawasashi to be in charge of the King of Fighters game. Kawasashi will later be known as the mind behind the Tenchu 3D action series. Joining Kawasashi are a number of talented designers, including Toyohisa Tanabe, Haruo Tomita, Sanichi Morioka, and Yoshisi Hashimoto. Lead designer Toyohisa Tanabe has been with SNK since 1989 and worked on many of the company's Neo Geo titles, like Baseball Stars Professional, Alpha Mission 2, Battle Chopper, and the Auto Fighting games. He is often considered one of the most important parts of the team, as he also worked on gameplay mechanics and will continue to do so for many KOF titles. Joining Toyohisa, Shinichi Morioka was tasked with character designs. While the original idea had characters from only Fatal Fury and Auto Fighting Collide, as work began on the King of Fighters, SNK decided to bring in other characters from old series, as well as bring new fighters into the fold. Work on the King of Fighters 94 has begun, and many ideas of new characters as well as design works are underway. A big challenge for the King of Fighters development team was to create characters that could stand against established ones, like Terry and Ryo in terms of design, charisma, and story. And one particular difficult task was to find and create a new protagonist for this series. SNK decided that the game, now officially titled The King of Fighters 94, will have a roster of 8 teams, each team made of 3 fighters and representing a different country. When designing the protagonist for the game, developers wanted a new hip hero who would easily rival the Fatal Fury and Auto Fighting characters in style. This of course led to the creation of Kyo Kusanagi. Through most of the game's development, Kyo was known as Seo Kirishima and was dressed in martial arts clothing common with fighting games at the time. But late in production, his name became Kyo Kusanagi, likely due to the King of Fighters story's change in direction towards the adaptation of the Yamata no Orochi legend, which we will talk about at length in future episodes. When designing Seo, SNK designer Shinichi Morioka used Shotaro Kaneda from the Akira manga as inspiration. Other influences included Joe Yabuki and Akira Fudo from the respective series Ashita no Joe and Devilman. While in charge of designing the character, Yuichiro Hiraki sought to contrast Kyo with Street Fighter character Ryu. He considered the character to be an overwhelming rival or a wall. He believed the latter was a popular character that couldn't be surpassed in the same field, so he made Kyo's characterization and design contrast Ryu so he could benefit from appealing to a broad demographic. He wanted Kyo to be a character who dislikes training and was strong due to natural talent. Now, since this was a team fighting game of 3 vs 3, SNK also had the challenging task to come up with 2 more characters that would constitute the heroic Japan team. The second character to join Kyo was his soon-to-become best friend Benimaru Nikaido, an eccentric character with electrifying powers. His design was loosely based on the character of Polnareff from the then very popular JoJo Bizarre Adventure manga. Even after Benimaru's name was decided, the game developers continued to refer to him as Polnareff. As for the third character of the protagonist team, the designers wanted to create a judo athlete who uses dynamic body tosses. Despite the criticisms, the creators were very adamant that Daimon would fight with his Japanese geta, and thus the character of Goro Daimon was born. The idea of Kyo's flames, Benimaru's lightning, and Goro's earth powers, which can all be seen as some sort of elemental powers, was derived from the anime Geta Robot. In the show, there were 3 featured heroes who served as the inspiration for the King of Fighters trio. The protagonist had a fiery persona, his friend was edgy and daring, and the third hero was the down-to-earth giant. It is also an homage to a Japanese old phrase of giving birth to fire, roughly translated as lightning strikes the earth which sparks the flames, hinting at the King of Fighters trio working together to defeat the villains. The story of the team had Kyo Kusanagi recently meeting both Benimaru Nikaido and Goro Daimon at the Japan Fighting Tournament, where Kyo came first, followed closely by Benimaru then Goro. Due to their achievement in this tournament, the 3 warriors received an invitation to enter the new King of Fighters tournament. At the time of the King of Fighters 94, the Orochi plot, which will constitute a big part of the franchise's detailed story, was not developed yet, as the idea of it did not originate until late in the development of the game. Thus, the Japan team's story, or specifically Kyo Kusanagi's story, was quite vague in this first title. The second team that would be seen as the secondary protagonist team is none other than Team Fatal Fury, made of Terry Bogard, Andy Bogard, and Joe Higashi. Terry's popularity was through the roof as Fatal Fury Special was still very popular in the arcades at the time. The designers wanted to keep Terry's image of a strong fighter intact. His moves were the same as Fatal Fury Special. Andy, on the other hand, saw a massive upgrade to one of his moves, the super special Shore Padan, which now became a lot easier to perform and harder to avoid. As for Joe Higashi, the Muay Thai fighter saw the biggest graphical update. Joe makes a big toothy grin during his win pose. Funnily enough, the designers had Joe show many missing teeth while grinning. However, they felt that the character's fans will be sad and upset to see him in such a state and decided to fill those missing teeth at the last minute before submitting the final version of the game. The story of Team Fatal Fury has Terry Bogard, the winner of the last 2 King of Fighters tournaments, learn about the new contest along with his brother Andy and close friend Joe while in a vacation. Thinking that either Geese Howard or Wolfgang Krauser might be behind this new event, they decide to enter the King of Fighters 94 as the Fatal Fury team representing Italy. Next comes the Auto Fighting team, made of Ryo Sakazaki, Robert Garcia, and Takuma Sakazaki. Unlike the Fatal Fury team, the Auto Fighting characters were very difficult to balance, since their moves in the respective game were very strong and required a stamina meter to perform. The developers decided to make these powerful moves slightly weaker than the Auto Fighting games, but even with that, they turned out quite the strong team. SNK was keen to use the newly created character from Auto Fighting 2, Yuri Sakazaki, with Ryo and Robert forming a Kyokugen karate team. But since Yuri shifted to the women's team, as we will see later, Takuma, Ryo, and Yuri's father was chosen to complete the Mexico team. Their story focuses on Takuma wanting to prove his Kyokugen style of karate, ordering his students, Ryo and Robert, to join him and form the Mexico team. Ryo, on the other hand, is angry at Yuri, who ran off to team up with 2 other female fighters and entered the tournament without the consent of their father. At the start of development, SNK decided to have a British team made of King, Billy Khan, and Big Bear. The latter proved to be difficult to adapt to the King of Fighters game at the time and was causing memory issues with the ROM. At the same time, Yuri Sakazaki was, as previously mentioned, very well received through Auto Fighting 2, and developers decided to scrap Big Bear in favor of Yuri Sakazaki. At that point, SNK noticed that they have a team with 2 females and wondered whether it would be better to make this an all-women fighters team and thus Billy Khan was scrapped in favor of the very popular Mai Shiranui. The team story has both Yuri and Mai quite frustrated that they cannot join a team with the people they wanted, Ryo for Yuri and Andy for Mai, so they decide to meet with King and ask her to form a team together, to which she agreed, forming the England team. While King of Fighters 94 was originally set to pit characters from only Fatal Fury and Out of Fighting series, the idea evolved to bring characters from other non-fighting games made previously by SNK. One particular game which was very famous in the late 80s is the Psycho Soldier game. The popular side-scroller featured a heroine by the name of Athena, as she travels through different lands with her trusted friend C. Kensu to rid the world from evil monsters and restore peace. SNK decided to bring both Athena and Kensu to the King of Fighters 94 with a design overhaul. Many fans expected Athena to have her school uniform, but SNK decided that it would be too nostalgic, and after going through multiple possible variations, they decided to go with a traditional looking costume, but made sure to have a nod to the school uniform in her character intro. As for Kensu, the designers felt that he was overshadowed in the Athena game and wanted to give him a cool overlook that would make him popular with the female audience. For the third member of Team China, the developers wanted to have a character with a unique fighting style. One particular style that SNK wanted to try was the Drunken Fist fighting style, made popular back then by the Jackie Chan movie Drunken Master. Thus, the idea of making this third fighter as the master of Athena and Kensu was decided, and Shin Gensai was created. The story of Team China has the legendary master Shin Gensai receiving a letter inviting him to the tournament, so he decides to enter to test his two pupils, C. Kensu and the pop star named Athena Asamiya. Similar to SNK bringing Athena and Kensu from the Psycho Soldier games, the King of Fighters 94 developers decided to bring some other characters from another popular arcade machine from the 80s, the Ikari Warriors. This 1986 run-and-gun vertical scrolling game was the second highest-grossing arcade machine in 1986 and made several sequels and ports outside of the arcade. The two playable heroes of Ikari Warriors, Ralph Jones and Clark Still, were chosen to transition to the King of Fighters 94. Early designs showed that both characters were to have the same attire and style from the Ikari Warriors game, but SNK wanted to update the outfits to fit the era, and thus shirtless Raph and Clark were abandoned for the more stylish and unique versions they now have. SNK later decided to give Clark sunglasses to further differentiate the two. For the third character of the team, SNK brought the leader of the Ikari Warriors, Hyder. Hyder made a first unnamed cameo in the intro of Ikari Warriors 3, and the King of Fighters 94 developers decided to expand his role and even gave him a tragic story. Few years before the start of the tournament, Hyder's wife and daughter, along with his entire military squad, were murdered at the hands of the game's boss, Rugal. Hyder himself even lost an eye as he tried to avenge his family, and Rugal let him live as a way to humiliate him. Years later, now a leader of the mercenary group the Ikari Warriors, Hyder received an invitation to the King of Fighters tournament, so he decides to bring his two top operatives, Ralph and Clark, and represents Team Brazil. Early in development, SNK wanted a team fully made of prisoners. First was the massively large Chan Kohan, using a chain ball as a weapon. His first design had him in a typical striped prison clothes, but creating all the graphics with that kind of stripe pattern was too difficult, so SNK changed his outfit to plain white cloth with a skull and crossbones mark. But that also turned out to be problematic, which led to Chang getting his tunic and chain's iconic design. The second character is Troy Bounge, a reference to the Freddy Krueger character from the Nightmare on Elm Street movie. His early design was too close to Freddy that SNK decided to tool it down a little in order to avoid any copyright issues in the overseas market. So about a month before the game was due, Choi's design changed to something more plain, as well as added suspenders. For the third character, SNK tried different designs to complete the prisoner's team, but due to various circumstances, it was decided to add Kim Cap-1 to the team. Kim was very popular at the time due to the great reception the character received in Fatal Fury 2 and Fatal Fury Special. The fact that Kim joined up with two criminals was seen problematic inside SNK, and thus the background story of Kim rehabilitating criminals came to be. So the story of the team starts with one day Kim watching the news on TV and saw that the known criminal Chung Ko-han had broken out of jail. Kim decided to head into the town in the middle of the night in search of Chang to teach him a lesson. It was then that Choi tried to attack him, but Kim easily defeated both villains and offered them a way for redemption, join his team for the King of Fighters, and prove that they can change. Early on, SNK also wanted to bring a boxer character to the King of Fighters 94, one unlike anything seen before. While typically boxer characters in fighting games were all dressed up as professional boxers, this new character will have stylish clothing and no boxing gloves. His name was decided to be Heavy D as a direct nod to the Heavy D and Boys musical group. An exclamation mark was added to Heavy D's name to protect the company against any kinds of lawsuits. The second character that would go on Team USA was Lucky Glauber, a basketball player and also a fighter. Lucky's entire idea was influenced by the character of Hakim from the 1978 Bruce Lee movie Game of Death. Originally, Lucky was designed as an African American man who is obsessed with Japanese culture, but as his design got updated and the developers added his American clothes and appearance, it no longer made sense for him to be a Japanophile, so the idea was dropped. The third character is the football player Brian Battler. Surprisingly, his idea and design were there long before many other important characters of the title. Initially, he wore a helmet and a chest guard with bolts sticking out all over it, but those were removed and his design simplified. Since the character's story has him have no experience in fighting, the game developers made it apparent by having the character unable to hit with a straight leg in any of his kicks. The story of Team USA has Lucky Glauber informing his friend Heavy D about the King of Fighters tournament. Although happy that he'll finally get a good fight after a long time, both are stumped about who could be the last member of their team. That's when they notice the TV showcasing a football player named Brian Butler. They decide to invite Brian to join them in the King of Fighters as the American sports team, representing USA. Other teams and characters were considered for the King of Fighters 94. This included the Circus team, a Rappers team, an Evil Snake controlling team, and even a team of Therianthropes, made of characters that are half human, half animal. But ultimately, it was the previously mentioned 8 teams that were chosen to make the roster of the King of Fighters 94. As for the game's final boss, SNK was always known for difficult and strong bosses in their games, and the King of Fighters 94 was no exception. Since the work on the King of Fighters 94 started, the developers wanted to make the biggest, baddest, and most evil boss ever created. Rugal Bernstein was designed to be such a character. Initially, he would be able to use any move he saw. But this idea was scrapped due to memory limitations, and instead the boss was given some moves from other SNK bosses, like Giz's Reppuken and Krauser's Kaiser Wave. His story was still being developed in the King of Fighters 94. He was a black market arms dealer who is interested in collecting strong fighters, defeating them and turning them into bronze statues. His story would be expanded further with the following game. Since the King of Fighters is a crossover between different franchises, SNK wanted the gameplay to also share similarities between other SNK fighting games. As previously mentioned, the King of Fighters 94 is a 3 vs 3 fighting game. Once the player chooses one of the 8 available teams, he or she will then choose the order of each of the 3 members. If the first member is defeated by one of the other team's members, the next member will come in to fight the winner. and will go on until all 3 members of one team are defeated. The gameplay utilizes many elements from the Fatal Fury franchise, such as the infinite special moves as well as super moves and the dashes. It also borrows the abilities to charge your special meters similar to the auto fighting series. KOF 94 also features a sidestep system. By pressing A+B, the player will dodge incoming attacks. When the life bar is flashing red, or if the special meter is at max, the player can unleash a super move with devastating damage. When the player chosen defeats all the other teams, the characters are transported to an aircraft carrier where they meet the game's final boss, Rugal Bernstein. Once defeated, Rugal self-destructs his ship in an effort to kill the winning team, but ends up, seemingly, only killing himself. While the King of Fighters franchise is known for its robust storytelling and detailed lore, the King of Fighters 94 is an exception, as SNK did not come up with the game's intricate story until very late in the development. While the King of Fighters 94 gameplay was very deep and original, one other aspect that would push the game into more fame is its graphics. The game's visual presentation was on another level. KOF 94 had great character designs and advanced animations not seen in any other fighting game at the time, and a big step forward from even the highly praised Fatal Fury Special and Samurai Showdown 2. SNK would even push the envelope further by including stage intros, adding more hype and excitement around the fights. Because the King of Fighters 94 is a team versus game, the developers had to think about the team members who are not fighting. This led SNK to push the graphical and memory capabilities of the Neo Geo to its limits and have the non-playing characters spectating the match, cheering for their team member, and even being called in specific situations. To keep the bar high when it comes to presentation, the developers decided early on that each win would be commemorated with a beautiful dramatic enemy loss followed by a splash image of the winning team with the character who ended the match in the middle. This added a lot of personality to the game. Sound-wise, SNK used the Neo Geo hardware's advanced capabilities at the time to create a memorable soundtrack, effects, and voices for the King of Fighters 94. Some of the game tunes were remixes from the previous work, like Auto Fighting for the Mexico team or Fatal Fury for the Italy team. While we now know that the King of Fighters 94 was a game changer for the genre and for SNK, things were not looking good during development. Due to the then massive cast and that the game is a team-based fighter, balancing the King of Fighters 94 proved difficult. Coupled with the fact that the developer had only 2 weeks to balance the game before shipping it, it fell mostly upon Tanabe Toyohisa to balance the game on a trial and error aspect. And since there was no option to edit the teams, Tanabe and SNK approached each team as they would a single character in another franchise, thinking that each King of Fighters character is only 1/3 of the team. This approach proved to be successful, as the King of Fighters 94 was considered upon its release as a balanced fighting game. But balance was not the only issue that threatened the King of Fighters 94. Throughout the difficult developing cycle, many SNK internal staff members did not have faith in the game. Some felt the designs of the characters and stages were bland, and others even expected that SNK would cancel the game before release. What made things worse was that the company sent an early build to the then very popular and highly regarded Gamist magazine for an early preview and to announce the release date for the game. But instead of hyping the game, the Gamist magazine staff were not very enthusiastic about the new King of Fighters 94. This was a difficult time for the young King of Fighters 94 developers team, as they had spent a difficult 2-year period developing this new game, and to see both internal and external opinion not being positive was very difficult to accept. As the game was approaching release, SNK decided to organize a location test in its Neo Geo Land Arcade Center, and as it will turns out, this event changed everything. Following the not very positive Gamers Magazine article about the King of Fighters 94, the developers were expecting the worst from this location test. But the reception the game received was beyond positive. It seemed that players resonated with SNK's new franchise, as the queues to play and test the game were some of the longest for its kind. This gave a huge confidence boost to the King of Fighters 94 developing team. King of Fighters 94 was released on the 25th of August in 1994 for the Neo Geo MVS arcade system. A Neo Geo AES home version was followed on October 1st, and then a Neo Geo CD with arranged soundtrack was released on November 1st. Just as the arcades were full with players lining up to play the new King of Fighters 94, Neo Geo AES and Neo Geo CD owners lined up outside game stores to buy the home version of KOF 94.
100メガショックネオジオいい加減本当にって言ってくださいよお願いしますよあなんか落としましたよ皆さんこれをよーくくださいこれが噂のキングオブファイターその噂は本当だった SNK 歴代の人気キャラが総登場テーマ待望夢のチームバトルザ・キングオブファイターズ94ネオジオ CD で新発売ついに真相が SNK
The game received rave reviews and a massive positive reception when released. In fact, according to Japanese Game Machine magazine, only 2 months after its release, the King of Fighters 94 became the second most popular title of the entire year. The game was also awarded the title of Best Game of 1994 in the 8th annual Grand Prize by the arcade magazine Gamest. Internationally, Electronic Gaming Monthly gave the King of Fighters 94 its Game of the Year award in the categories Best Fighting Game and Best Neo Geo Game of 1994. While critics both in and outside Japan all praised the game's deep gameplay, graphics, and ambience, they all disliked the inability to edit your team, a complaint that SNK took to heart and intended to fix in the next iteration. Ironically, even with all its popularity, the King of Fighters 94 did not get a home console port outside of the Neo Geo. The reason remained unclear. While some blamed the high graphics and memory requirement of the game, others state that 1994 was the time where console gaming was getting ready for the next generation of the 32-bit hardware, and many developers were focused on the next gen of gaming. Even though SNK was at the time investing in anime adaptation of their properties, with the likes of the Fatal Fury, Samurai Showdown, and Auto Fighting anime, King of Fighters 94 would not see such treatment and will only get an adaptation until 2017 with the King of Fighters Destiny CGI anime adapting the plot of the first game. As for mangas, many books were released featuring the King of Fighters 94. While many of them were humor-centric comas, 2 titles were treated as a serious adaptation of the title. The first is the King of Fighters 94 Gaiden by Ryo Takamisaki. This 6-part manga adapts the game from the perspective of the women fighters team of Mai, Yuri, and King. The second manga, which is made of 4 volumes, is titled The King of Fighters 94 and is by Tatsuya Shingyoji. This series focuses on the Italy team of Terry, Andy, and Joe, making them the true heroes and winners of the tournament, rather than the canonical Japan team of Kyo, Benimaru, and Goro. The King of Fighters 94 has proved to SNK that the new 3 vs 3 crossover series has the potential to not only stand on its own among the fighting games giants, but to surpass them, as both the arcade and Neo Geo home versions of the game were a huge hit for the company, both critically and financially. The King of Fighters 94 developers team, which was seen as the underdog team within SNK, and had previously endured a harsh and stressful development cycle, which included many project cancellation threats, has now become the most revered of the company's internal teams, as SNK decided to capitalize on the success and made the King of Fighters a new flagship series. The success of the King of Fighters 94 was so disruptive that SNK moved to prioritize the new team versus team game sequel over other titles, and quickly greenlit the sequel to the King of Fighters 94. Because KOF 94 was supposed to be a one-off, the company hesitated on the sequel's title, but ultimately they decided to make this new, very lucrative series a yearly event, and the title The King of Fighters 95 was chosen. SNK's goal for the King of Fighters sequel was simple: take what worked on the previous title and make it better. Initially, due to the excitement from the great reception that the King of Fighters 94 received, the King of Fighters development team wanted to redraw all the sprites and start from scratch for this new chapter. The team started drawing new sprites with better animation and more details, but then quickly realized that this very ambitious approach will not allow them to release the game by the agreed deadline. Instead, the King of Fighters 95 team decided to take a more realistic and sustainable approach of reusing the assets from the King of Fighters 94 and slightly retouching them. The plans for the new sprites would be put aside to be used for, at the time, the untitled second sequel. One area where SNK changed course at the last minute during the King of Fighters 94 was its lore. The game's original story was very basic and was not to be taken seriously. But that all changed before the original game release, when the protagonist of the series' design and name were changed from Sho to Kyo Kusanagi. The Kusanagi family name has ties to the famed Japanese folklore story of Yamata no Orochi. The Yamata no Orochi folklore is a famous tale that is integral to Japanese mythology, particularly in the Shinto tradition. The story is about a fearsome 8-headed and 8-tailed dragon called Yamata no Orochi, which had an enormous body that stretched over 8 valleys and 8 hills. Every year, this monstrous creature demanded the sacrifice of a young maiden from the nearby village. The story is closely associated with the deity of Susanoo, the Shinto god of the sea and storms, who in the tale used the famed Kusanagi no Tsurugi sword to slay the demon. The Kusanagi sword is one of the 3 imperial regalia of Japan, which are highly revered symbols of the Japanese imperial family's legitimacy and authority. The other 2 are the Yasakani jewel and the Yata mirror. These regalia, also known as the 3 sacred treasures of Japan, play a crucial role in Japanese mythology and the enthronement ceremonies of the Japanese emperor. SNK decided to fuse the Yamata no Orochi folklore story with that of the 3 sacred treasures, and thus a long-running narrative of the series was born. Game director Masanori Kawasashi was the one responsible for coming up with the plot of what we now know as the Orochi saga. He decided to make Orochi as a deity that sees itself as the spirit of the earth and could no longer tolerate human civilization's expansion at the expense of nature. 1800 years ago, Orochi decides to destroy the human race once and for all. The demon gathered a large following in the form of a clan. The 8 strongest warriors of this clan are known as the Hakkeshu. Orochi decided to use the powers of nature to wipe humanity from existence. The Hakkeshu and the human race waged countless wars until the leaders of 3 Japanese clans, the Kusanagi, the Yasakani, and the Yata, defeated the demon with the 3 mystical treasures: the Kusanagi sword, the Yasakani jewel, and the Yata mirror. The Orochi was defeated but not vanquished. As the spirit of the earth, the demon could never be fully killed, so the 3 clans decided to use their 3 mystical treasures to seal Orochi in a suspended state. The second part of the story takes place 660 years before the events of the King of Fighters 94. Centuries after being defeated and sealed, the seal of Orochi has started weakening. The then leaders of the three sacred clans, the Kusanagi, Yasakani, and the Yatta, decided to move the seal to a hidden location. Wanting to disrupt their unity, one of the clan members that worships Orochi killed the Yasakani's leader's wife and blamed it on the Kusanagi clan. Angered by his loss, Yasakani made a blood pact with Orochi to gain the necessary means for revenge. The Yasakani would then change their family name to Yagami, and as a side effect to the Orochi blood now running in their veins, the once crimson flames of the Yasakani changed to a purple one. While this was the full lore behind the King of Fighters 95 and two of its sequels, the developer team decided to only reveal a little bit about the story through the game, and hoped that each new sequel will reveal more of the King of Fighters' new tale. In terms of playable characters, the new King of Fighters 95 kept most of the previous game's roster except for the USA team. SNK wanted to replace the sports team with a new one that would be important for the game's narrative. Introducing the non-conventional hero Kyo Kusanagi in the King of Fighters 94 was very well received, as the character quickly became a fan favorite. As previously mentioned, Kyo was designed as a new type of hero, unlike other series protagonists like Terry Bogard for Fatal Fury, Ryo Sakazaki for Art of Fighting, or Capcom's very popular Ryu from Street Fighter II. Initially, during the King of Fighters 94, Terry Bogard was the rival of the new hero, an idea seen in the box art of the King of Fighters 94. However, Kyo's unconventional and well-received design gave the King of Fighters dev team the idea of introducing a brand new rival, and one that can tie to the game's developing lore. Many designs were introduced and tried for the rival character, named Iori Yagami, before deciding on the final one. SNK also wanted to make the character have a unique personality that would be apparent from his sprite animations and voice acting. Since Kyo Kusanagi, from the Kusanagi clan, sports a sun logo on the back of his jacket, it was decided that Iori, who was written as a member of the Yagami clan, would have a crescent moon design, showcasing the rivalry not only between Kyo and Iori, but also the respective clans. Once the iconic design for Iori was locked, work went into giving this new character a unique personality, unlike anything seen in a video game before. Iori's gameplay was created from the beginning to show his rude and violent personality. While violent characters in video games were nothing new, especially looking at other fighting games of the era, like the then very popular Mortal Kombat 2, Iori Yagami in the King of Fighters 95 brought a new level of sadistic intensity and seen in games at the time. The new character openly wished for his enemies' deaths, using phrases like "sonomama shine," meaning "die as you are," and "nake sakebe soshite shine," which translates to "cry, scream, and then die." His unique moves in the game included grabbing and headbutting his opponents and setting them on fire while laughing at them and wishing them to die. Many of his attacks included clawing his opponents while showing delight in their pain. All these elements combine to make Hiyori a unique character that will make his mark in video game history. It was important for SNK to get Hiyori right, as the character was written to be an important part of the franchise's upcoming narrative. Hiyori's story was written to be both tragic and anti-heroic. As the last descendant of the Yagami clan, Hiyori grew an orphan, as the Orochi blood running through his veins causes the mother of each heir to die in childbirth and the heir to die in his young age. Now that the main rival for the King of Fighters protagonist was ready, the King of Fighters developers decided to make him part of a team that included other rivals to existing characters. Billy Khan, Geese Howard's right-hand man from the Fatal Fury franchise, was chosen as a rival for Terry. Billy was considered to be part of an early version of the England team in the King of Fighters 94. As for the third character, SNK went with Eiji Kisaragi, a rival to Ryo Sakazaki. Eiji made his debut in The Art of Fighting 2 and was a fan favorite for both his ninja attire and unique skills. Thus the rival team was complete. The rest of the cast from the King of Fighters 94 are all back. A subtle change was also enacted when it comes to team names. Rather than representing countries like the previous game, each team now has a unique name that fits its power or narrative. For example, the Italy team of Terry Bogard, Andy Bogard, and Joe Higashi is now Team Fatal Fury, while the China team is now Team Psycho Soldiers. This gave the characters more personalities and emphasized the importance of the narrative. Speaking of narrative, all returning teams now have had new story elements and developments. More teams were planned for the sequel. First was a boss team made of Geese Howard, Wolfgang Krauser, and Mr. Big. The idea of the boss team would be used in the eventual sequel to the King of Fighters 95. Another team that almost made the cut was the Samurai Showdown team, made of Haomaru, Nakoruru, and Galfort. SNK really wanted to include characters from the very popular Samurai Showdown 2, but due to time constraints, the team would be cut from the game. Many other original characters were planned and then abandoned, like a traditional karate fighter, a skater girl, and what would be an early version of the character of Chris, who will make his big debut in the King of Fighters 97. While the sprites for the King of Fighters 95 characters were similar to 94, an incredible work was done on the stages, as the new stages of the sequel were more vibrant, colorful, and had more spectators. Keeping up with its prequel, the King of Fighters 95 also had spectacular stage intros. Having decided on the narrative of the series, SNK wanted to only plant seeds in the King of Fighters 95 rather than reveal it all. Knowing that Orochi would be the big bad of the series, Masanori Kawasashi wanted to showcase the power of Orochi and decided to bring back the big bad of the previous game, Rugal Bernstein, as the boss for the King of Fighters 95. However, this time, instead of Rugal looking into making bronze statues of his enemies, he is now interested in the Orochi power. Through a yet-to-be-revealed backstory at the time, the sadistic arms dealer has tapped into a small amount of the power, which then turned him into the terrifying Omega Rugal. The idea was to show how powerful Orochi is, since just with a tiny bit of the Orochi power, Rugal becomes this insanely powerful version of himself. While the team planned for Rugal to be the final boss from the beginning of development, Rugal's portrayal was debated. At some point, Rugal would have been a fusion of the scrapped boss team of Geese Howard and Krauser. Another plan had Rugal combine with his Black Panther, Rodham, in the second round of the final match. But that also was abandoned for the Omega Rugal design. Speaking of bosses, the King of Fighters 95 developers decided to add a sub-boss to the new game. Kyo Kusanagi's father, Saishu, who appeared at the end of the previous game in Team Japan's story. Initially, the plan was for Saishu to remain dead for the rest of the franchise, but in the later stages of the game's development, it was decided to make Kyo's father the sub-boss. A subplot of him being brainwashed by Rugal's secretary Vice was also introduced. The King of Fighters 95 gameplay remained unchanged from the previous title, but one major option was introduced. When the King of Fighters 94 was released, most reviewers complained about the inability for the player to make his own team, so SNK decided to make Team Edit the major change for the game. Rather than be forced to pick a set team of 3 fighters, players can now make their team from any 3 fighters from the game's roster. Surprisingly, the option to edit the teams was ready in time for the King of Fighters 94 release. However, game producer Takashi Nishiyama preferred to keep the option for an eventual sequel. His reasoning was that if you have the ability to edit the teams from the first game, the whole weight for a team-based fighter will be lost, as people will focus on single fighters rather than a team of 3. The story of the King of Fighters 95 will go down as the true first chapter in the game's detailed lore and sagas. A year has passed since the King of Fighters 94. Kyo Kusanagi, who had left Japan after the events of the King of Fighters 94 in order to train, made his return to his home country and was greeted by his 2 friends and teammates, Benimaru Nikaido and Goro Daimon. As the trio reunited, a mysterious masked figure attacked the team. After a fierce battle, Kyo's flames broke the assailant mask and it was revealed to be Mature, Rugal's secretary, the same person that guided the team last year to Rugal's Black Noah carrier. Mature then handed the trio the invitation to the new tournament, the King of Fighters 95. The letter had the same mysterious R seal on it. Kyo, Benimaru and Goro wondered whether this means that Rugal is still alive. All the teams from the previous tournament received their invitation for the new King of Fighters, including the American sports team. But not for long, as they were attacked by 3 other fighters who would defeat them and steal their King of Fighters invitation. The attackers were Billy Khan, right-hand man to Southtown crime boss, and previous King of Fighters organizer Giz Howard, Eiji Kisaragi, a mysterious ninja with a grudge against the Kyokugen karate practitioners, and finally Iori Yagami, the heir to the Yagami clan, formerly known as Yasakani. Iori wanted a chance to enter the tournament and kill Kyo Kusanagi, as the 2 families have been at each other's throat since the Orochi incident 660 years ago. The American sports team losing the invitation would be the start of a running gag where the trio always gets beaten before the tournament and have their invitation stolen. A few weeks before the game's release, a location test for the King of Fighters 95 took place at the Neo Geo Land Game Center. The reception was once again highly positive. One key takeaway that SNK noticed from this planned test is the great appeal of the new character. Iori was the most used character during the test period, giving the King of Fighters developers confidence in their design choices. The King of Fighters 95 was released on July 25, 1995 on the Neo Geo MVS arcade system. A Neo Geo AES and CD version were released on September of the same year. The King of Fighters 95 also marks the first time the series is ported to home consoles. First was the Sega Saturn version, which was released on March 1996. This version came with both a CD and a ROM cartridge. The bundled ROM cartridge contains the majority of the character animations. It was the first video game to use a CD-ROM and a ROM cartridge combination in tandem.
SNK アーケードを極めたあの格闘ゲームがついにサターンに完全移植。ゲーマーの夢が今感動に変わる。 The King of Fighters 95 3月28日 on sale SNK.
A PlayStation version was also released in Japan on June 96, followed by the North American version in August 1996. The European version of the King of Fighters 95 did not release until the following year, in 1997, due to a European exclusive deal between Sega and SNK. With the exception of the loading times, which were miles better than the Neo Geo CD, the King of Fighters 95 ports were very close in quality and almost identical to the Neo Geo version. This was the first time home ports and arcade versions of SNK games were similar, which showcased the power of the 32-bit systems, unlike the 16-bits era where compromises had to be made. While the PlayStation and Saturn version of the King of Fighters 95 were great ports, it was another port that actually was the highlight of the King of Fighters 95 home releases: Netto King of Fighters 95. A unique port of KOF 95 on the Nintendo Game Boy handheld. Takara, the toy company turned game developer, had already surprised everyone with great Neo Geo game ports. Following their success with Samurai Showdown and Fatal Fury 2, Takara and SNK joined forces to release the first ever portable version of the King of Fighters. Much like the Fatal Fury 2 before, Netto KOF 95 uses super deformed sprites that retained all the moves from their Neo Geo counterpart. Due to memory constraints, the Game Boy version of the King of Fighters 95 came with only 15 playable characters and only 3 stages. With the exception of the rival team of Iori, Eiji and Billy, all the remaining teams were not complete compared to the Neo Geo versions. However, all the playable characters retained all their moves, specials and supers from the arcade version. The game also included 3 hidden characters. First was Nakoruru from Samurai Showdown. The character, as we mentioned, was supposed to be in the arcade version of the game in her own team, but unfortunately was cut. The other 2 hidden characters are the game bosses, Saishu Kusanagi and Omega Rugal. All 3 characters were unlocked via special code. The King of Fighters 95 on the Game Boy also allowed versus play via the Game Boy Link or the Super Game Boy. And speaking of Super Game Boy, the game contained special backgrounds and colors when used in conjunction with the Super Nintendo Game Boy adapter. Similar to the previous game, the King of Fighters 95 received rave reviews and a very positive critical reception. In Japan, the King of Fighters 95 was ranked 2nd in popularity among arcade games in the September 1st, 1995 issue of Game Machine magazine. Both the Neo Geo AES and CD versions experienced robust sales. Computer and Video Game magazine lauded the King of Fighters 95 as possibly the best 2D fighting game ever created. EGM honored the game with the title of Best Neo Geo Game of 1995. The reviewers praised the Neo Geo AES version for surpassing its predecessor, especially highlighting the new Team Edit feature. GamePro also favored this feature along with the introduction of the rival team and changes to the controls. Similar to the King of Fighters 94, there was unfortunately no anime adaptation of the King of Fighters 95. As far as manga adaptation, no serious manga was released. But similar to other games, few gag compilation mangas or Koma mangas were available to coincide with the release of the King of Fighters 95. KOF 95 can today be played on many modern consoles thanks to the Aka Neo Geo series of games available everywhere. The game was also re-released as part of the Orochi Saga collection for the PlayStation 2 and the PlayStation Portable. Following the release and success of the King of Fighters 95, it was clear that SNK had a brand new flagship series that surpassed all expectations. It was also decided that this new series would see yearly sequels and become SNK's most important IP. As previously stated, during the early development of the King of Fighters 95, SNK planned to redo the entire sprites for the game, a monumental task that was abandoned early on as it would have required more time to release the highly anticipated first King of Fighters sequel. But now that the game had become SNK's biggest IP, it was time to revive the ambitious idea of revamping the series. Immediately after the release of the King of Fighters 95, SNK started work on the next chapter. The sprite redesign intended for the previous game became a key aspect of the new one. The developers decided to redraw every single character from scratch to add more fluidity and more moves to the now iconic roster. But redoing the art wasn't enough for SNK. The company wanted to ensure that each KOF sequel would bring something new to the franchise rather than just minor changes to the game and characters. For that reason, the entire gameplay of the King of Fighters was revamped. This ambitious plan resulted in a massive workload for the development team as the game was not fully completed until just few days before its intended release. Following the announcement and the first reveal of the new game, titled The King of Fighters 96, it was very clear that this was the next iteration of the franchise. The graphics looked like nothing the Neo Geo had ever produced, pushing the system to its limit and utilizing the full VRAM capabilities capped at 68 KB of RAM as well as the full 64 KB of system memory. The King of Fighters 96 sprites looked bigger, better, and beautifully animated. It was clear that SNK was creating the most visually stunning fighting game of the time. SNK's graphics mastery extended beyond the sprites to the stages, which were filled with animated spectators and included brand new stage intros. Since the very first King of Fighters game, the series always generated hype around the rotating roster, and the King of Fighters 96 was no exception. The character roster underwent major changes since the previous game. While many of the previous teams returned, there were several changes and new additions as well. The rival team, introduced in the King of Fighters 95 to great reception, had disbanded. Due to Iori Yagami's massive popularity, the new Yagami team was introduced. Joining Iori were two previously seen characters, Mature and Vice, who were Rugal's secretaries from the King of Fighters 94 and the King of Fighters 95 respectively. Their inclusion also played into the overarching narrative of the series. The second new team added to the game was one intended for the King of Fighters 95, the Boss Team, composed of Geese Howard, Wolfgang Krauser, and Mr. Big. the main bosses of the Fatal Fury and Auto Fighting series. The boss team was one of the first new teams considered for the King of Fighters 96, as the SNK developers team had wanted to add these 3 SNK bosses in the previous sequel, but were unable to due to time constraints. The boss team received special treatment such as music for each individual member, in contrast to other teams who only had one. This gave the 3 boss characters more personality and gravitas, and emphasized their significance when added to the King of Fighters. However, due to memory restrictions, some of the special moves designed for Geese Howard had to be left out of the game. As previously mentioned, some of the traditional King of Fighters teams received major changes. First was the Auto Fighting team, which now included Yuri Sakazaki instead of her father Takuma. Since Yuri was no longer part of the Women Fighters team, a new member was added to the game, Kasumi Todo, who was introduced due to the coinciding release of Auto Fighting 3, which made the character popular. The Ikari team also saw a shakeup, as Hyder was no longer playable. In his place, Leona, his adoptive daughter, made her debut. Leona, who would become an important part of the narrative, went through multiple designs before the final one. The developers wanted to add a second female fighter to the Ikari team, a woman who uses a whip in battle, but due to time constraints, the idea was abandoned and later resurfaced when the King of Fighters 99 was being developed, which is something we'll discuss in a future chapter. 2 new boss characters were introduced to the series with the King of Fighters 96. First was the tournament's new organizer Chizuru Kagura, who would become an important part of the narrative, as well as the new powerful final boss, Genitz. Several new characters were considered for the new sequel, including a new fighter who initially looked like a fusion between Kyo and Yori's designs. This idea eventually evolved into the character of Shingo Yabuki for the sequel. Other character ideas and designs were considered, but ultimately dropped. Graphics and roster weren't the only things that saw big changes, as the gameplay itself underwent a massive overhaul, making this game feel like a soft reboot of the King of Fighters franchise. The biggest change that players noticed when playing the new game was how the King of Fighters 96 removed most long-range projectiles in favor of short-range ones. Characters like Ryo Sakazaki and Robert Garcia, whose popular projectiles, the Hoken, no longer traveled across the screen, and now has more of a push mechanic than a projectile. Kyo Kusanagi's playstyle was completely changed, replacing his fireball with a multi-hit fiery punches. Yori remained one of the few characters whose projectile attacks stayed the same. This was a huge gamble for SNK, yet it wasn't the only major change in gameplay. The King of Fighters 96 introduced the roll mechanic. Unlike the dodge ability present in the King of Fighters 94 and 95, pressing A and B allowed the player to roll past attacks and get close to the opponent for an offensive opportunity. Pressing back and A plus B allowed the character to roll backwards away from the opponent. This installment also introduced 2 more mechanics that would become staples for the series going forward. The ability to run, which replaced the forward hop dashes, and the possibility to determine the height of the character's jump, introducing the famous hops that are now a series-defining feature. Interestingly, command normals are absent in this iteration. The POW gauge also received major changes. When a fighter took damage or blocked attacks, the meter gauge gradually filled up, with the rate depending on how strong the hit was. Getting hit by multi-hit attacks caused the gauge to fill faster. Players could also manually charge the gauge using the Power Builder Surge move by pressing A, B, and C simultaneously, but this, as in the previous games, left the fighter highly vulnerable. Once the gauge was fully charged, it reaches the maximum level, and the fighter's offensive power temporarily increases. During this heightened state, players could unleash the character's unique desperation move for massive damage. The max state, however, only lasts for a short period of time. Additionally, when the POW gauge was filled to the max from blocking or taking damage, it depletes faster. However, using the Power Builder Surge to charge the gauge gave players more time in the max state before it drains completely. The character's life gauge had 6 segments, and when it drops below 2, it starts flashing red. During this critical phase, characters could perform desperation moves repeatedly without needing a full POW gauge, similar to the previous King of Fighters titles. A new feature in this game, however, allowed players to execute a super desperation move if their life gauge was flashing red and their POW meter was full, dealing up to double the damage of the regular version of these supers and offering different flashy animation. This could be a game changer, providing a chance to turn the tide of the battle. Since SNK took the story of the King of Fighters franchise very seriously, the developers team used this new chapter to further elaborate on the intricate and expanding lore. They were also clever in injecting some of the lore into the game by adding special character introductions when certain fighters faced each other. This little addition added a lot of personality to the game and showed how much SNK respected the lore of the franchise. The story of the King of Fighters 96 takes place a few months after the previous game, with Rugal Bernstein defeated and the mystery of Orochi beginning to unfold. The series protagonist Kyo Kusanagi now sees himself as an invincible fighter, only to be approached by a mysterious figure who challenges the Kusanagi heir to a fight. This man is so powerful that Kyo, the hero team leader, cannot land a single blow against him. Badly injured, Kyo is rushed to the hospital where Benimaru and Goro are waiting for him. Feeling humiliated, Kyo decides to take his training more seriously and makes it his goal to exact revenge on this mysterious foe. A few months after this incident, the King of Fighters 96 is announced, but with a twist. The event has now exploded in popularity, and this new tournament will be hosted on an international level. Kyo and his friends from the hero team once again, and many teams from the previous tournaments, make a comeback. Some in familiar fashion, like the Fate of Yuri team, and others with unexpected changes, like the Ikari team, with their leader Haydn stepping aside for his adopted daughter Leona to join Ralph and Clark. The biggest surprise among the participating teams, however, is undoubtedly the Yagami team, consisting of Iori Yagami and Rugal's previous secretaries Vice and Mature. These two mysterious women tracked Iori before the tournament and persuaded him to join their team, promising to help him get the fight against Kyo that he always wanted. Once again, the tournament ran its course with the teams fighting spectacular battles. The hero team, composed of Kyo, Benimaru and Goro, reached the finals once again and is greeted by a mysterious woman, Chizuru Kagura, who reveals herself as the organizer of this year's tournament, as well as the guardian. She explains that her true goal was to lure out the Kusanagi and Yagami heirs to unite and fight the real threat, the awakening of Orochi. But before she can elaborate further, the man who previously defeated Kyo and sent him to the hospital makes his entrance and destroys the stadium where the finals are being held. His name is Genet, and he reveals himself as the leader of the Hakeshu, the powerful warriors of the Orochi clan. He also reveals that Mature and Vice were working under him all along and were keeping an eye on Iori Yagami, since he is a descendant of the Yasakani, and thus the Orochi blood runs in his veins as a result of the blood pact that his ancestor made with Orochi 660 years ago. Seeing an opportunity to finally end all three heirs of the clans that defeated his demon master 1800 years ago at once, Genitz attacks the trio but is ultimately defeated by Kyo with the help of Iori and Chizuru. Humiliated, Genet takes his own life. Understanding what lies ahead, Chizuru asks Kyo and Iori to put their differences aside and join her as their ancestors once did, to be ready to fight and prevent the resurrection of Orochi. However, both Kyo and Iori reject the idea of working together and go their separate ways. With such an ambitious graphical and gameplay overhaul, the development period of the King of Fighters 96 extended right up to its scheduled release, and understandably so. At the location test for the game, which was only a few weeks before its release, Mature and Vice were still not included in the game, as the staff did not have enough time to complete them. But that did not stop the great reception the game received at its first location test. The risky changes to projectiles and gameplay mechanics from the King of Fighters 95 were welcomed by fans, giving SNK confidence before releasing the game. The King of Fighters 96 was released in arcades on July 30th, 1996 to great reception, particularly in Japan. Game Machine magazine listed the King of Fighters 96 on their September 1st, 1996 issue as the most successful arcade game of the month. According to Famitsu, the Neo Geo AES version sold over 33,000 copies in its first week. The game received both praise and criticism from non-Japanese video game publications. For example, Electronic Gaming Monthly gave the Neo Geo AES version 7.5 out of 10, citing the huge roster of fighters, the retention of the series' strong playability. However, they criticized it for failing to improve graphically over the previous installment, something that Japanese publications did not agree with. Following its arcade release, the game was ported to the Neo Geo and Neo Geo CD, with these versions launching on September 27th and October 25th of the same year, respectively. The Sega Saturn version arrived later on December 31st, and the PlayStation version followed until July 4th, 1997.
今年もまた奴らに会える。アーケードの興奮が、迫力が、快感が、ついにサターンにやってきた。サターン版 The King of Fighters 96 coming soon. SNK.
Unlike its predecessor, the PlayStation and Saturn ports were exclusive to Japan, though they offered a language setting that allowed players to switch the game to English. The Saturn version of the game also supported a 1 meg RAM cartridge, which enabled additional animations that wouldn't fit into the Saturn's internal memory. A Saturn Best Collection edition was released on October 1998. The PlayStation version was a bestseller and was later re-released as part of the PlayStation The Best series in Japan. A special database titled The King of Fighters 96 Neo Geo Collection was released on February 14, 1997, to coincide with the release of the King of Fighters 97. This collection was exclusive to the Neo Geo CD and featured a wealth of content, including the game's intro, an interactive reenactment of the backstory, character profiles narrated by the respective voice actors, outtakes, a gallery section with exclusive artwork from the creators, a complete command list, and a sound selection. A similar version, dubbed the King of Fighters 96 Perfect File, was later released for Windows and Macintosh computers on June 1997. This version retained most of the features found in the original Neo Geo CD release. Similar to the previous installment, a Game Boy adaptation of the King of Fighters 96 was released by Takara in Japan under the title Netto The King of Fighters 96 on August 1997. This version was later brought to Europe in 1998 as the King of Fighters Heat of Battle. The Game Boy version improved graphically from its predecessor and pushed the Game Boy to its limits. Netto King of Fighters 96 featured only 17 of the original 29 characters due to the memory limits of the Game Boy cartridges. As it was customary for Takara Game Boy ports, the King of Fighters 96 featured several hidden characters and modes. Besides the ability to play as the bosses Chizuru and Genet, the King of Fighters 96 on the Game Boy added two exclusive characters that would play an important role in the mainline sequel, Orochi Iori and Orochi Leona. These two versions were different from the eventual ones seen in the King of Fighters 97, and were called in this game Iori Dash and Leona Dash. This marked the first time these two fighters were playable in the series. Mr. Karate, a version of Takuma Sakazaki, was also included as both a secret boss and an unlockable character. Netto King of Fighters 96 also included a secret Carnage mode, which allowed the power gauge to fill automatically without charging, enabling players to use more powerful versions of super special moves and regular special moves without needing low health. In 1998, a pirated version of the game was created for the NES system by a company called Hummer Team. This unauthorized version included only 7 characters: Leona, Iori, Chizuru, Genitsu, Yuri, Goro, and King. Although the initial plan was to feature 20 characters, 13 of them were ultimately removed. These cut characters included Kyo, Benimaru, Terry Bogard, Andy, Joe Higashi, Ryo Sagasaki, Kim, Raph, Athena, Kasumi, Mai, Giz, and Krauser. Similar to the previous releases, the King of Fighters 96 received no anime adaptation. Around 1996, SNK had abandoned its plans for anime adaptations for its properties following the abysmal reception of most adaptations, with the exception of the Fatal Fury anime series by Masami Obari. In terms of manga, there were multiple Koma mangas or comedy comic books adapting stories from the King of Fighters 96. However, 2 manga series took themselves more seriously. The first was the King of Fighters G by Ryo Takamisaki, a sequel to the King of Fighters 94 Gaiden manga. And like its prequel, was an adaptation of the King of Fighters 96, but from the perspective of Athena Asamiya. The story took many liberties but was well received by fans. The second manga series, which would have a big impact on the franchise as a whole, is the King of Fighters Kyo by Masato Natsumoto. This manga, which lasted for 3 volumes, was launched to coincide with the release of the King of Fighters 96. The story retells the events of the King of Fighters 96, albeit differently from the game it is based on. For example, the manga does not show all the game's roster, and there was no tournament setting. The manga also introduced the idea of Kyo and Iori as talented musicians, which added to their lore. Despite its changes to the lore, the King of Fighters Kyo was considered the most successful manga of the King of Fighters franchise and helped pave the way for a future King of Fighters RPG. The King of Fighters' popularity in China also spanned a Chinese comic or a manhwa depicting the events of the King of Fighters 96. Though the book will infamously go down as an odd adaptation that took so many liberties and adopted over-the-top fights and stories. The King of Fighters 96 also marks the first time the famed writer Akihiko Ureshino writing a light novel about the title. Titled The King of Fighters 96 Rumbling on the City, this official novelization focuses on Leona and Iori. This will not be the only time that Ureshino will write official novels for the King of Fighters titles. The release of the King of Fighters 96 coincided with the height of the series' popularity. The characters of the franchise became larger than life, with fans obsessed with their voice actors and seeking more information about these fighters. SNK capitalized on this by introducing a number of original products to the market. One such project was the Band of Fighters. The Band of Fighters was a character-themed image band featuring Kyo Kusanagi, Iori Yagami, Terry Bogard, Nakururu from Samurai Showdown, and Athena Asamiya. Set in an alternate universe from their usual game narrative, these fighters resolved their conflicts through singing and dancing. The concept was expanded to include other popular characters as guest stars in their performances. Various merchandise items including mugs and key holders were produced for the band, along with drama CDs that chronicled their adventures. Band of Fighters was more than just a concept, it was also an event held at the Neo Geo World, first premiering in 1996. The show featured audio animatronic versions of the 5 characters who sang and performed their songs on stage, accompanied by a monitor displaying select character portraits. The stage that hosted these robot performances was also used for live shows, special events, concerts, and announcements involving the game voice actors. The massive gamble that SNK took with the King of Fighters 96 by altering gameplay and mechanics from previous entries paid off tremendously. Not only did the game sell well, but it also propelled the King of Fighters series to unprecedented levels of popularity. However, as the King of Fighters became an annualized series, the next chapter was already in the planning stages. And by this time, the King of Fighters had become a global phenomenon, spawning music CDs, mangas, and even live stage performances, captivating players with its evolving story and intricate gameplay systems. Behind the scenes, however, the development team faced internal shifts. Masanori Kawasashi, a veteran of the series, stepped away after the production of the King of Fighters 96, marking a pivotal change in the team's direction. Kawasashi realized that with the series' annualized nature, it was becoming creatively stifling. Fearing a sense of repetition, he opted to leave before being stuck in a creative loop. His departure also followed by Shinichi Shimizu, another key figure at SNK who transitioned to work on the exclusive RPG Shinsetsu Samurai Spirits Bushido Retsuden, or as it is known in the West, Samurai Showdown RPG. Shimizu later left SNK entirely, teaming up with Kawasashi and the King of Fighters 94 director at Sikyo to develop the versus fighter Daraku Tenshi. The monumental task of concluding the Orochi saga then fell into the capable hands of Toyohisa Tanabe, the last remaining member of the original King of Fighters 94 core team. Tanabe was promoted to direct the King of Fighters 97 and later its sequel, the King of Fighters 98. His leadership was instrumental in shaping the future of the series, continuing to balance characters and fulfilling his role from previous titles. However, he also took on the added responsibility of crafting the ongoing story and developing new characters to keep the King of Fighters series fresh and innovative.
They're back to for the answer they found to be searching. Is it their fate or just bloody coincidence? It shall be clear as 3 powers will be as one. Now, the 4th phase is about to begin.
King of Fighters 97. The story moves toward final destiny.
Tanabe and his team knew that they needed to culminate the entire plot points from the King of Fighters 94, 95, and 96 in the new game and make it in a way that exceeds all expectations. Fans were expecting to learn the identity of the true villains of the saga as Oroshi's resurrection was looming. But concluding the first saga meant introducing the proper new and returning characters that would feed the great narrative of the series. Tanabe collaborated with various gaming magazines such as Weekly Famitsu, Gamest, and Neo Geo Freak, polling readers for input on character choices and ideas. Readers were invited to vote for their favorite characters, and the results would decide who made the new game's roster cut. Famitsu's readers crowned Ryuji Yamazaki as their pick, while Billy Khan took the top spot in Neo Geo Freak. Blue Mary narrowly claimed victory in Gamest's poll, edging out Fatal Fury's Duck King by just a handful of votes. In addition to the official team lineup, the 3 magazines also took the opportunity to create their own fantasy teams, which players would see an image of after beating the game in the Japanese version. Neo Geo Freak's team featured a trio of fighter wielders, Billy Khan, Kyo Kusanagi, and Mai Shiranui. Gamist assembled a classic Fatal Fury squad of Terry Bogard, Blue Mary, and Joe Higashi. Famitsu, and in a more offbeat choice, created a team of Chen Kohen, Choi Bangi, and Yamazaki. Interestingly, even though Blue Mary had two existing designs from her appearances in Fatal Fury 3 and Real Bout, her designer opted to use her original Fatal Fury 3 look for the King of Fighters 97, feeling that it was the stronger of the two. Meanwhile, Yamazaki's inclusion had a deeper narrative purpose. With the need to complete the group of the 8 Orochi servants, the Hakeshu, the developers felt Yamazaki with his snake-like persona was a fitting addition, rather than adding another new character to the roster. To adapt him for the King of Fighters, new moves were created for Yamazaki, though these initially faced criticism before eventually being embraced by the team. Another brand new team to join the King of Fighters universe is the New Faces team. Their introduction was another key decision. This trio of Chris, Shermie, and Yashiro was designed to serve as counterparts to the hero team. Chris wielded fire like Kyo, Shermie controlled lightning like Benimaru, and Yashiro's imposing size mirrored Goro Daimon. Chris in particular, who almost made it as a member of the roster in previous game, was set up as the final boss Oroshi's new vessel from early in development. Although the team initially considered giving Chris black flames, these flames of darkness were difficult to see on screen, leading to the now iconic purple flames. The boss Oroshi's final design also underwent changes. Early concepts envisioned him as a fully naked Chris fighting with a glowing energy orb. But after poor feedback in internal surveys, they settled on the final form we know today. KOF 97 was also the first game to introduce single-entrant characters not affiliated with the team. While many fans speculated on who the very popular Iori Yagami would team up with in this new game, SNK surprised everyone by revealing that Iori would be a single entrant. Along with Iori, a brand new character would also fall into the single entry category, Shingo Yabuki, a character that was planned for the previous game but, due to time constraints, was pushed to the sequel. During the development of the King of Fighters 97, the team wanted to balance the dark and intense storyline of the Orochi saga with some levity. This desire led to the creation of Shingo, a character meant to lighten the mood and offer a bit of comic relief. Drawing from popular anime tropes, especially those centered around school rivalries, Shingo was designed to bring a light-hearted energy to the roster. The developers envisioned Shingo as a perfect foil to Kyo Kusanagi, the series' main hero. While Kyo embodies the role of the powerful and confident protagonist, Shingo was intended to be the opposite, a simple and plain everyday guy. He wasn't meant to steal the spotlight, but rather serve as a more relatable character, someone less polished and heroic. His introduction was planned to reflect this, with the idea that Shingo would be marketed on a smaller, less prominent scale compared to the more established characters. However, despite their efforts to keep Shingo's presence low-key, he quickly became more prominent than originally intended. His silhouette appeared in pre-release promotions, sparking curiosity and excitement among fans. Instead of being a modest addition, Shingo became a hyped-up character before the game's release, gaining more attention than the developers had anticipated. A new idea that was planned from the early stages of the game was to include a dark evil version of two popular characters, Iori and Leona. This was the reason these two characters were included in the King of Fighters 96 Game Boy version, as we have previously mentioned. Orochi Iori was originally intended to be the game's final boss, appearing after the player defeated the New Faces team in their Orochi forms. However, the developers eventually made him a mid-boss, reserving Orochi as the true final battle. The decision to include Orochi Iori initially caused some hesitation, with the staff worried about fan reactions. Yet the gamble paid off, especially when location tests revealed shocked and excited responses from female fans. To further deepen the narrative, Leona was also given an Orochi form as a mid-boss if the player had Iori on their team, providing additional paths and surprises for the player to discover.
Round 1. Ready, go!
And speaking of different versions of existing characters, Kyo also had a hidden version in the King of Fighters 97. In the King of Fighters 96, several moves from Kyo were changed in order to adapt him to the new gameplay system. However, the original moveset was still popular among gamers, and as such, an alternative version of Kyo was added to the King of Fighters 97. Dubbed EX Kyo, this version brought back the fiery projectiles as well as his Oburuguma triple kick attack. Naturally, a number of designs were prepared for potential new characters, but were abandoned for different reasons.
For the answer they found is in their fate or just bloody coincidence. It shall be clear as three powers will be at war. Now, the fourth phase is about to begin.
Graphically, the King of Fighters 97 used the same sprites that were redrawn during the King of Fighters 96 development. The stages in this game, however, all celebrated the King of Fighters as a sort of festival event, and for the first time in the series, the game stages were not tied to the roster teams. Music also saw a major change, with only a few team members having their own music themes. The developers wanted the player to hear the stage sounds as if they were truly present spectating a real-life King of Fighters tournament.
KO! Perfect! Yes! Winner is Andy!
In terms of gameplay, SNK took the new mechanics introduced in the King of Fighters 96, built on them, and separated them into two distinct playstyles that the player could choose from: Advanced and Extra. The Advanced mode brought a more aggressive and strategic approach to battles, building on the King of Fighters 96 new mechanics. Players could use the roll-in mechanic to quickly evade or close in on opponents, setting up opportunities to build their POW gauge through special moves. The gauge filled up as fighters performed specials or took damage, with multi-hit attacks accelerating its growth. Once full, a power stock was earned, represented by a flashing green orb. Up to 3 stocks could be stored, and each one unlocked the ability to unleash powerful desperation moves. But that is not all. Having at least 1 stock allowed the player to activate the Max mode, a mechanic that would become a series-defining staple. In this mode, the player's attacks dealt extra damage, while also taking less damage from the opponent. The mode was timed, and while it was active, and the player had additional stock saved, they could unleash an even more devastating super desperation move, dealing up to twice the damage of the standard version. Making it a powerful tool for turning the tide of battle. Once Max mode ended, the character reverted to normal but retained any unused stocks. The second gameplay mode is Extra mode. This mode draws inspiration from the defensive mechanics of the King of Fighters 94 and 95, emphasizing calculated evasion and power management. Players could use the classic dodge mechanic to evade incoming attacks, while the power charging ability lets them manually build up the POW gauge. As fighters took damage or blocked enemy attacks, the gauge would gradually fill, with multi-hit attacks and combos speeding up this process. Similar to previous King of Fighters games, charging the gauge left the player exposed to counterattacks. Once the gauge maxed out, it flashes the word maximum, boosting the fighter's offensive capabilities for a limited time. During this heightened state, players could unleash their character's signature desperation move. The maxed gauge offered only a brief window of increased attack power. Similar to the previous titles, in this mode, when the character's life gauge fell below 20%, it starts flashing orange, allowing desperation moves to be performed indefinitely, even without a full gauge. If both the life gauge was low and the POW gauge was full, a devastating super desperation move could be executed, delivering up to twice the damage of the regular version. While a full POW gauge drained quickly when built through damage or blocking, using the power charger gave players more time in its max state before it emptied. To allow new players and those interested in the lore of the characters to understand the relationship between the growing size of the roster, SNK implemented a fun feature to clarify how each member feels about the other: social relations. In the order select screen, the player could hold down the start button to see smiley icons that depicted character relationships. These icons identified whether teammates would help by calling off a backup attack in both advanced and extra modes. The character relations directly reflected on the team member's order you designated. A happy smiley face meant the two characters were on friendly terms. If undefeated, they would always help in a backup attack. A neutral smiley meant the two characters were indifferent to each other. If undefeated, they might or might not help in a backup attack. An angry face meant the two characters despised each other. Even if undefeated, they would never assist with a backup attack. This feature, though not widely understood at the time, reflected how much SNK and the King of Fighters developers team cared about the lore. Returning from the previous game and taken to the next level are the special intros between characters that have relationships in the game's lore.
年貢の納め時よアンディ。
前行くぜクラーク。おうクロスセンター。
And speaking of the lore, the King of Fighters 97 was the culmination of the Orochi saga, which began with the King of Fighters 94. The stadium destruction incident that took place at the end of the King of Fighters 96 tournament was officially reported as a terrorist attack by an unknown group whose motives and whereabouts remained a mystery. Despite this, the King of Fighters 96 tournament was a massive media and commercial success. Major corporations raced to sponsor the next iterations of the now famous tournament, leading to the announcement of the King of Fighters 97. As expected, many teams from the previous tournaments made their return. While some are joining for glory or fame, others are hoping for answers, such as the Ikari Warriors, as Leona Hayden has been suffering from unexplained headaches and hallucinations. Along with returning teams, new ones were also making their debut, like the new women fighters team with now Chizuru Kagura joining Mayan King, as she felt that the awakening of Orochi is near and hopes to convince Kyo and Iori to join her in her battle to save the universe. Another new team that joined the event for the first time is one made of newcomers Yashiro Nanakaze, Chris, and Shermie. This new team was not originally invited to the King of Fighters 97. The trio, known as CYS, are a popular music band. While they were getting ready to perform in a show, the club owner cancelled their appearance at the last minute in favor of booking a jazz show featuring Iori Yagami. Furious at the man with the red hair, as Yashiro calls him, they decided to steal a tournament invitation from the American sports team and entered the King of Fighters 97 in order to have the revenge. As for Iori, the Yagami heir also has been suffering from headaches and hallucinations similar to Leona. He was also being hunted by Vice and Mature, whom he previously slain at the end of the King of Fighters 96, mocking him for being unable to have his revenge on Kyo. All these events made Iori decide to enter the tournament, but as a single entry contestant. This also marks the first time in the team-based tournament history where single contestants were accepted. And on the subject of single entrant contestants, another unknown would-be fighter decides to join the event. Having watched the King of Fighters 96 on television and realizing that his schoolmate Kyo Kusanagi is a famed fighter and champion, the young Shingo Yabuki decides to become a pupil of Kusanagi despite the latter refusing. Having learned Kyo's moves by watching him every day, Shingo also enters the King of Fighters 97. The tournament has started, and again, countless exciting battles took place, with many of them receiving worldwide media coverage. During the tournament, however, the unexpected has happened. The New Faces team made of Yashiro, Chris, and Shermie suddenly remembered their true nature. They are members of the Hakeshu, specifically the Four Heavenly Kings, along with the now deceased leader Genitz, the final boss of the previous game. Once their past memories regained, they used the tournament to draw enough power from the contestants in order to finally awaken the long dormant Orochi. Around the same time, Kyo finally confronts Iori in what would seem to be the fight of their lives. Iori entered in a rage state, one that will be known as the Riot of the Blood. Similarly, Leona also finds herself in the same uncontrolled rage, as it turns out that she also has the blood of Orochi, as her true late father, Gaidel, was a reformed Hakeshu. As for Iori, having awakened from the Riot of the Blood, decides to accept Chizuru's call to team up with her and Kyo and form the Sacred Treasures team to stop Yashiro, Chris, and Shermie from reviving Orochi. The Sacred Treasures team took on the Three Heavenly Kings, who revealed their plan to sacrifice Kyo's girlfriend, Yuki, in order to revive the dormant deity. An intense battle between the two teams took place. The power generated by the unprecedented battle helped Orochi awaken from his slumber. Yet the energy was not enough for the demon to have a physical form. Seeing that there is no other choice, Yashiro and Shermie sacrificed their lives in order to transfer their life energy into Chris, who would be used as the vessel for Orochi's return. The demon that terrorized the world 1800 years ago is back. Orochi, with his full power, is now ready to destroy humanity as he always wanted. But history repeats itself, and a battle unlike anything seen before took place as the three descendants of the Kusanagi, Yasakani, and Yata joined forces and defeated the demon, just as their ancestors once did. Orochi, sensing his defeat, awakens the Riot of the Blood in Iori, hoping that he will turn on Kyo and Chizuru. But instead, Iori Yagami was able to control his rage and directed it towards Orochi. As Yagami jumps on the demon and grabs him by the neck, Kyo suddenly gets a vision as he hears the voices of many of the Yasakani clan, Iori's ancestors, explaining the history behind the Yagami and the connection to Orochi. Kyo then uses the opportunity created by Iori and gives Orochi a final death blow, as Chizuru uses her Yata powers to reseal Orochi once again. A massive explosion took place, and the three warriors lost consciousness. Orochi is finally defeated, but upon waking up, Chizuru finds Iori, yet there was no sign of Kyo. The King of Fighters 97 was released in Japanese arcades on July 28, 1997. It was later ported first to the Neo Geo AES on September 25th, followed by the Neo Geo CD on October 30th.
バビッとやっつけちゃうぞ
Round 1. Ready, go!
A Sega Saturn version released on March 26, 1998, requiring the same 1 MB cartridge used by the King of Fighters 96. Similar to previous releases, the King of Fighters 97 also saw a PlayStation version exclusive to Japan, that was released on May 28th of 1998. A Sega Saturn Best Collection version was released on October 1st, 1998, featuring new cover art and a lower price.
蹴りをつけようぜ、ヤガミ。
様の死をもってな。レディーゴー。
本物の格闘を求める全てのゲームファンに送る最後の決戦。あのバトル、あの興奮、あのリアルなファイティングシーンが帰ってきた。 The King of Fighters 97 SNK.
Unlike the King of Fighters 95 and 96, KOF 97 did not receive a Game Boy port from Takara. One major reason was SNK's impending release of a portable console the following year, the Neo Geo Pocket, with plans to launch the device alongside the popular King of Fighters title. The King of Fighters 97 then received a special port on the Neo Geo Pocket in 1998 known as the King of Fighters R1. This portable version of the King of Fighters 97 took inspiration from the old Takara Game Boy releases by portraying the characters in the lovable super deformed form. The gameplay of the King of Fighters R1 was similar to KOF 97, with both the extra and advanced playstyle available as well as all the special and super moves of the game's roster. Speaking of roster, and like the King of Fighters 97, which offered a large number of characters, due to the Neo Geo Pocket's limitation, the King of Fighters R1 offered 5 teams of 3 characters in addition to 2 single-entry fighters, Shingo and Leona. Orochi versions of Iori, Leona, and the New Faces team were also present as hidden characters. Upon its release, the King of Fighters 97 received rave reviews from publications worldwide. In the West, AllGame, one of the first video games news websites, praised the presentation of the game, calling it the best in the series and also labeling KOF 97 as one of the best in the 2D fighting genre. In Japan, Game Machine magazine listed the King of Fighters 97 on their September 1st, 1997 issue as being the second most successful arcade game of the month. By August 98, the King of Fighters 97 had shipped 50,000 arcade sets in Japan and an additional 100,000 overseas, the highest number among Neo Geo games at the time. According to Famitsu, the AES version of the game sold over 19,000 copies in its first week on the market. While the King of Fighters 97 did not receive any manga adaptation, the title did receive an official light novel by Akihiko Ureshino. Ureshino's work was so revered by fans in SNK that the author would eventually work on helping craft the King of Fighters storylines from the King of Fighters 96 up to the King of Fighters 13. While there was no manga, a Chinese manhwa depicting the events of the King of Fighters 97, albeit in over-the-top manner, was released in China. Despite the challenges faced during development, SNK succeeded in delivering an unforgettable conclusion to the Orochi saga, with the introduction of new gameplay mechanics and a fusion of fan-driven ideas. The King of Fighters 97 became a testament to SNK's dedication to keeping the series at the forefront of fighting game world. Following the release of the King of Fighters 97, SNK had already hired a third-party company, Yumekobo, to work on a King of Fighters 97 RPG game, the title of which was decided to be the King of Fighters Kyo. The King of Fighters series is renowned for its deep stories and lore. From its first game, the King of Fighters established itself with the legendary Orochi saga, spanning 4 games and culminating spectacularly with the King of Fighters 97. The next installment was the non-canon King of Fighters 98, a fan favorite to this day. Around the same time as KOF 98 development, a small company, Yumekobo, composed of former members of the Sammy Arcade developers, signed a deal with SNK to create a visual novel RPG based on the King of Fighters series. With the King of Fighters 97 receiving critical acclaim for its story, SNK and Yume Kobo decided to offer an even deeper and more elaborate retelling of that game's events. SNK and Yume Kobo aimed to make the RPG immersive, with striking manga and anime visuals, retaining the already established and recognizable KOF style. In the 90s, it was common for popular games to receive manga adaptations, and the King of Fighters was no exception. Among the many adaptations of the early King of Fighters games, notable ones include Ryota Kamisaki's King of Fighters 94 Gaiden and KOF-G, or Tatsuya Shinkyoji's King of Fighters 94. However, none matched the success of Masato Natsumoto's The King of Fighters Kyo. This manga, which lasted for 3 volumes, was launched alongside the release of The King of Fighters 96. The story of the manga retells the events of KOF 96, though it deviates from the games. For example, it doesn't feature the full roster and lacks a tournament setting. Despite this, it became the most successful manga in the King of Fighters franchise. Capitalizing on the manga's success, SNK and Yume Kobo hired mangaka Masato Natsumoto to illustrate the new game's visuals. To align with the popular manga, the game was titled The King of Fighters Kyo. With the release of The King of Fighters 97 on the PlayStation, SNK included the first advertisement for the upcoming King of Fighters Kyo.
So, 1998年ザ・キングオブファイターズ新展開アドベンチャーゲームザ・キングオブファイターズ今日
In 1998, The King of Fighters Kyo was released exclusively on the PlayStation in Japan only. Although it shares the same name as the manga, The King of Fighters Kyo is neither an adaptation nor a direct continuation. The game is a retelling of The King of Fighters 97 and does not shy away from contradicting the manga, such as presenting The King of Fighters 96 as a tournament. The game's story begins 11 months after the events of The King of Fighters 96, as the world anticipates a new KOF tournament. Kyo, having won the previous KOF tournaments, has lost his drive to fight, something his rival Iori does not take kindly to. Meanwhile, Iori struggles with the Riot of the Blood, a condition that plunges him into uncontrollable rage. The narrative follows Kyo Kusanagi as he searches for his reason to fight, traveling the world, meeting all the new fighters, and interacting with key characters like his self-proclaimed apprentice Shingo Yabuki, his girlfriend Yuki, his parents, and the enigmatic New Faces team who show a keen interest in him. Starting in Kyo's hometown of Osaka, player travels to other locales like Southtown and Mexico, encountering more characters. Many characters maintain their personalities from the manga, such as Kyo and Yuki, while others differ significantly. For example, Saishu Kusanagi's Kyo's father, who was a comic relief in the manga, is now portrayed as a serious character. In terms of gameplay, The King of Fighters Kyo is a visual novel with turn-based combat mechanics. Players drive the narrative by talking to various characters and making choices. During fights, the game switches to turn-based RPG combat, where players select moves from a menu. The battle features King of Fighters 96 and 97 sprites with all their glory, while the super moves are presented with a stunning anime and sprite combinations.
Power Gator! 極限流オラオラオラオラオラもらった覇王昇降拳
As Kyo explores the world and uncovers story elements, players can unlock new characters for their roster, which can be used as Kyo's teammates. Most of the cast from the King of Fighters 94 to 97 are present, with some omissions like Krauser and the American sports team. The King of Fighters Kyo, though obscure, adds depth and personality to the beloved King of Fighters characters, showcasing them in unique settings beyond fighting. The game even includes unexpected side events, like a song battle between Iori and Kyo where the two compete by singing. The game also introduces original characters that drive the story, including the expanded Kusanagi family with Soji and Aoi Kusanagi, as well as the Sendo brothers. While these characters never appeared in future KOF games in playable form, Soji Kusanagi made a cameo in the ending of the King of Fighters 98. Other story elements such as Iori's struggle with the Riot of the Blood outside of the tournaments and Kyo's fear of losing control later appeared in future games and drama CDs. The King of Fighters Kyo is an incredibly unique game that unfortunately never saw release outside Japan. A group of fans have unofficially translated the game into Spanish. With its compelling storyline, impressive visuals, and engaging quests, the King of Fighters Kyo remains one of the games I really hope to see officially re-released in English. Against all odds, the King of Fighters 97 was SNK's biggest release in the popular King of Fighters series. The game director Toyohisa Tanabe was able to successfully take on the helm of the series and delivered an outstanding title and an epic conclusion to the Orochi saga narrative. The game was so big that it had an effect on how fighting game storytelling should be addressed. Both the public reception and the sales data showed SNK that the King of Fighters was more popular than ever and that the King of Fighters 97 was a milestone for both the game and the company. As fans expected a new title every year, SNK decided to once again task Toyohisa Tanabe with working on the new sequel. Due to the massive work that went into properly culminating the first major arc of the King of Fighters series, SNK and Tanabe decided that for this new sequel, they would take a break from advancing the narrative and instead make a game that celebrates the previous releases. Thus, the idea of a dream match, the subtitle used for the King of Fighters 98, was born.
It all began in 94, kept on rolling in 95, this is where it plays in 96, it came to an end in 97, and now it comes, and here we go, KOF is here again, nothing's gonna stop, it's 1998.
Not having a canon story allowed the King of Fighters developers team to bring back characters who were canonically dead, like the now very popular Orochi team. This was a way to celebrate the franchise and allow players to enjoy these characters. One of the teams that finally made a comeback was the American sports team, which only appeared in the first game of the series. Made up of Heavy D, Lucky Glauber, and Brian Battler, these characters had never been updated graphically. SNK decided to go back to the drawing board, redraw these fighters, and give them new moves and specials. Other characters were also updated, like Vice and Mature, who now have more moves than in the previous appearances. Hydran and Takuma also made a comeback with new updated sprites since they were last seen in the King of Fighters 95. Joining them was Kyo Kusanagi's father, Saishu, who was last seen as the mid-boss character for the King of Fighters 95. Speaking of bosses, Rugal Bernstein, the famous boss of the King of Fighters 94 and 95, finally made his proper gameplay introduction as a selectable character in the roster. While Rugal was previously playable in some ports of the King of Fighters 95 as a secret character, this was the first time the King of Fighters boss was meant to be a competitive character with proper balance. When the King of Fighters 97 was released, it offered players for the first time the ability to choose a different version of some characters, like EX Kyo, Orochi Iori, and Orochi Leona. The idea was very popular among fans, so SNK decided to offer more alternate versions of established characters in the King of Fighters 98. These included Terry, Andy, Joe, Mai, and Billy, who now have an EX version reminiscent of their Fatal Fury Real Bout 2 iteration. Ryo, Robert, and Yuri also had an EX version similar to their King of Fighters 95 version. The Orochi versions of Chris, Yashiro, and Shermie were also selectable. With more time to focus on graphical fidelity, now that there was no new narrative for the game, SNK decided to raise the ante when it came to the game stages and music. While stages were not tied to teams as they were between the King of Fighters 94 and 96, the King of Fighters 98 offers some of the series' most beautiful and memorable stages. One iconic stage was the Asaka Station stage, which was a true rendition of the bridge outside the Asaka Station in Osaka, an area close to the SNK office where many of the staff used to walk by. The King of Fighters 98 also happens to be the first game in the series where players could choose the stage in which they would fight in versus mode. In team and single play modes, the stages were automatically chosen randomly. While in the King of Fighters 97, only a few characters and teams had dedicated music, for the King of Fighters 98, SNK made sure that every team had their own theme, and some characters had their own music that played under certain conditions. The special intros between characters, which were introduced in the King of Fighters 96 and expanded upon in the King of Fighters 97, also saw an upgrade, with many characters now reacting to fighting their rivals. This added more personality to these now iconic characters. In terms of gameplay, SNK decided to keep the now very popular Advanced and Extra mode selection introduced in the previous game and added a little refinement to it. Enter the new Advantage system, a mechanic that rewards players as they lose their team members, giving them a slight advantage to help turn the tables. In Advanced mode, the Advantage system rewards players who lose team members by increasing the maximum number of stocks they can hold. The first team member can store 3 stocks, the second can store 4, and the final fighter can hold up to 5 stocks at a time, offering a strategic advantage when the stakes are highest. The Advantage system also applies to Extra mode users, reducing the time it takes to charge the POW gauge as teammates are lost. This mechanic ensures that as battles progress, players have more opportunities to access their most powerful attacks. The social interaction feature introduced in the King of Fighters 97 also makes a comeback and now has an effect on the Advantage system. In the Order Select screen, players could hold down the Start button to see smiley icons depicting character relationships. These icons identified how POW stocks were affected between rounds in Advanced mode, and whether teammates would help by calling off a backup attack in both Advanced and Extra modes. The character relations directly reflect the order of team members designated by the player. A happy smiley face meant the two characters were on friendly terms, awarding one power stock when the next character came into play. If undefeated, they would always help in a backup attack. A neutral smiley meant the two characters were indifferent to each other, leaving stocks unchanged. If undefeated, they might or might not help in a backup attack. An angry face meant the two characters despised each other, resulting in one stock being deducted when the next character entered. Even if undefeated, they would never assist with a backup attack. Another important goal that Tanabe and his team had was to offer a well-balanced game, free of the issues later found in the previous game. This was a very time-consuming process that paid off, as the King of Fighters 98 was, and still is, considered one of the most balanced King of Fighters games. Interestingly, as the team worked on balancing the game, Tanabe thought it would be fun if Ryu and Ken from Street Fighter series were playable in a King of Fighters game. Unknown to upper management, Tanabe and his team drew the two Street Fighter characters and added them in playable form to the then in development King of Fighters 98. This was just a fun experiment and predated any series talks about SNK and Capcom collaborating for the Capcom vs SNK and SNK vs Capcom titles. It was also recently revealed that the same build included a version of the famous Dragon Ball Z protagonist Son Goku. Unfortunately, the build that included these characters was lost and never found again. The King of Fighters 98 was originally released in the arcades on July 23, 1998. A home version for the Neo Geo AES was then released on September 23rd of the same year, followed by the Neo Geo CD version on December 23rd. A PlayStation version was released in March 99, and for the first time in years, the port saw a release in North America, published by H-Tech, becoming the first PlayStation installment in the series to be released outside Japan since the King of Fighters 95.
It's here! The revolutionary Neo Geo Pocket Color!
The King of Fighters 98 also received a unique port on SNK's new Neo Geo Portable, the Neo Geo Pocket Color. The color was released only a few months after the monochrome Neo Geo Pocket, which had the King of Fighters R1 or Round 1, a King of Fighters 97 adaptation, as a launch title. With the Neo Geo Pocket Color releasing in March 1999, SNK decided to create a brand new King of Fighters game based on the King of Fighters 98, the King of Fighters R2.
キングオブファイターズがネオジオポケットカラーに新登場。格闘モード、育成モードで最強のファイターを作り上げろ。キングオブファイターズラウンド2 Now what's that?
The game offered 18 playable characters, including the game's boss Rugal Bernstein. Almost all the mechanics from the arcade version of the King of Fighters 98 were ported to the game, like the advanced and extra modes, as well as the characters' moves and specials. The game also offered versus mode via the Neo Geo Pocket Color Link cable, as well as data transfer to the then in development Sega Dreamcast version of the King of Fighters 98, which we will discuss shortly. The King of Fighters R2 also featured an extra mode called Journey. This mode allows the player's favorite characters to be buffed with certain assets. Points earned in this mode could transfer to the Dreamcast port of the King of Fighters 98 to help boost characters and unlock gallery images. Speaking of the Dreamcast port, this port was released in the summer 1999 and is called the King of Fighters Dream Match 1999.
あのキングオブファイターズがついにドリームキャストに登場。しかも両ポケカラーと接続して新しい遊びが広がります。ドリームキャスト版ザ・キングオブファイターズドリームマッチ1999 Now on sale.
Unlike other console ports of the King of Fighters 98, Dream Match 1999 offered a number of changes and improvements to the game. First, the stages of the game were redone using 3D. The select screen and victory screens were completely redesigned. The music was also remixed and refined. And finally, a beautiful new anime intro was produced for the game. Multiple comical mangas were produced to coincide with the release of the King of Fighters 98, as well as an official light novel by Akihiko Oreshino that delves into the story of Shingo, since the King of Fighters 98 game itself was not canon and had no story. The King of Fighters 98 received rave reviews and was considered the best King of Fighters chapter in the series. In Japan, Game Machine magazine listed the King of Fighters 98 in their September 1st, 1998 issue as being the most successful arcade game of the month. According to Famitsu, the AES version sold over 22,651 copies in its first week on the market. During its release week, the Dreamcast version of the game sold over 58,000 copies in Japan. Worldwide, the game was also praised as an excellent addition to the successful King of Fighters series. IGN rated the Dreamcast version of the game 8.4, praising the gameplay, characters, graphics, music, and background designs. GameSpot called the game the best 2D fighting game of the time. Throughout the years, the King of Fighters 98 saw multiple re-releases, but none were more notable than the King of Fighters 98 Ultimate Match.
It all began in 94, Hector rolling in 95, pieces were replaced in 96, it came to Japan in 97, now it comes, and here we go, KOF is here again, nothing from sagas 1998.
Released 10 years after the original King of Fighters 98, Ultimate Match was an updated version of the game that offered a number of additions and enhancements to the roster and game system. The upgrade was first released in Japan as an arcade game for the Taito Type X hardware in March 2008, before receiving a PlayStation 2 version on June 26th of the same year. Released under the new rebranded SNK Playmore, the King of Fighters 98 Ultimate Match brought back many characters that did not initially make it to the King of Fighters 98, including many of the bosses such as Genitz and Orochi, as well as the famed King of Fighters 96 boss team of Geese, Krauser, and Mr. Big. Additionally, new alternate versions of characters were added, such as EX Blue Mary and EX Yamazaki. Meanwhile, other alternate versions of characters gained brand new portraits, first seen in the console versions of the original King of Fighters 98. In terms of gameplay, the King of Fighters 98 UM received a number of changes. First, Extra Mode received several significant revisions, bringing it more on par with the widely popular Advanced Mode. Players can now manually activate Max Mode in Extra Mode when the gauge is fully charged, rather than it triggering automatically. The full gauge is stored as a single stock, giving players the flexibility to choose when to unleash its power. Additionally, a new Quick Max Mode was introduced exclusively for Extra Mode, allowing players to activate Max Mode during a connecting hit, excluding grabs or throws. This feature cancels the player's attack into Max Mode without the typical power-up pose, enabling smoother combo extensions and offensive opportunities. Other enhancements include faster gauge charging, quicker recovery from the charging animation, and improved side steps with reduced recovery frames. Extra Mode also saw changes to the advantage system for later team members. Instead of adjusting the power bar's length, it now increases the critical HP range threshold, allowing players to use super moves and super special moves without cost when in near half HP. To balance this, the HP bar enters a cooldown period after using a free super move, preventing spam during critical moments. To further compensate for the stationary dodges limitations compared to advanced mode's rolling, Extra Mode grants a slight increase in walking speed, giving players a better chance to reposition strategically. Finally, the King of Fighters 98 introduced a brand new gameplay mode called Ultimate Mode. Unlike Advanced and Extra modes, which come with their own set gameplay features, this new Ultimate Mode allows the player to fully customize their gauge systems and mechanics. Players can choose between advanced or extra styles, deciding their preferred gauge type, dodging method, and quick movement style, offering an unprecedented level of personalization for gameplay. A new version of the game, titled The King of Fighters 98 Ultimate Match Final Edition, was released as well, containing various tweaks to the characters and game mechanics. It was initially released for the arcades, with PC versions later being released through Steam on December 16, 2014. Finally, in 2021, this final edition was updated with rollback netcode, allowing fans to play this amazing game online from the comfort of their homes.
KOF is here again. Some sagas 1998.
But whether it's the original version or the Ultimate Edition, the King of Fighters 98 remains one of SNK's most successful releases. Tanabe's meticulous work on the game's balance ensured its strong and long-lasting presence in tournaments throughout the years. Even today, the King of Fighters 98 continues to attract players from around the world to compete in this highly successful game.
And he gets the slides.
As Dako tried to escape, Xiaohai slides in to maintain his status as Neo Geo World Tour.
The King of Fighters 98 is considered the pinnacle of the King of Fighters series. With a large roster, great gameplay and balance, and multiple ports, it truly felt like the end of a chapter for the King of Fighters franchise. But when a chapter ends, a new one shall begin, and the next one would mark a big evolution for the King of Fighters saga. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Big shout out to the channel's Patreons and premium subscribers for helping the channel and making this content possible. You can become a Patreon or a premium subscriber by checking the link below or clicking on the join button below this video. Until next time, thank you guys for watching.